Assalamu alaikum, Khawateen Hazrat. Waseem Ahsan welcomes you to lecture number 44 of Marketing for Nonprofits MKT728 at the Virtual University of Pakistan. The component of learning is going to be planning and budgeting marketing mix. And the reason I call it marketing mix is because we believe in strategic marketing management, which basically is all about employing the four variables of marketing mix. And therefore, uh, being a part of an organization that believes in this kind of a marketing philosophy, we have to call it budgeting for marketing mix. It's nothing more than deciding the kind of financial resources that we need to have at our disposal in order to make our programs very effective. So, in other words, we can say that we've learned everything and we have done everything as far as the organization is concerned. And yet, in other words, we can say that we know the strategic intent, i.e., we know the resources that we have at our disposal and we know the competencies. When I talk about resources, I mean the human resources as well as the financial resources and any other resources, technology resource, or anything else that is going to be implied in terms of executing our programs and enabling us to fulfill the mission. So we are very clear about the strategic intent, and we also have taken into consideration the future environmental factors because they are in sight, and we have the competence to be able to assess and analyze those environmental factors, and thereby we are having good plans. And then we are also clear about the strategy that we have formulated. As a matter of fact, we have a set of different strategies that are formulated in order to execute the programs, and we have the organization structure in place. So, in other words, four important components are there for us to be very happy about the platform that is going to provide us with all the expertise to be able to execute our programs and then know how much it is going to cost us to execute those programs. And to summarize, I would say that those the four components are the strategic intent, and then the environmental factors, and then you see the set of strategies, and then, of course, the organizational structure. We have to have a structure which responds to our purpose. In other words, the why we exist, that is something that has to be addressed, and we have the right structure which is going to enable us to move forward with the program or a set of programs for which we exist. That is the key. Now, the question is how much it is going to cost, because we are going to be in the process of planning our budgeting. There are the two different classes of decisions that we initially could have to make in order to know all that and establish all that. And these two classes are, I would say, structural support mechanism or structural decisions, and the other one is program decisions. Let us talk about the structural support system or structural decisions. It is all about having a support system which enables us to move forward with the programs that we want to execute. And what could be those support systems or strategic components that are absolutely essential to the organization to put together everything that we need to plan and then budget. Well, we need to do some work on the marketing research side. Just to give you one example, we need to develop new programs, in other words, new products, and we have to have the expertise to be able to do that. And then we may need very special skills in order to have very creative kind of communications the programs that have a lot of punch and thrust to convince the target audience. And therefore, we need to reach the target audience with the help of the communications skills um, is one of the support systems or one of the support mechanism that we need to have at our disposal to move forward. And then we need to have a very good team of management which is good at not just traditional marketing practices, but also is knowledgeable of the latest digital marketing trends. So these are some of the supports that are absolutely essential for a nonprofit organization to sustain itself if it really wants to subscribe to the um, strategic marketing management practices. And I would say if it employs all the variables of marketing mix in a very strategic way. Having said that, let me tell you that there is no organization that has all the support systems in place for it to draw on those from within the organization. So, in other words, you may not have all these kinds of supports in house, and you may have to approach other organizations or consultants or other people in order to draw on their expertise. The equivalent of this particular scenario could be a production facility which is not really equipped to produce any kind of models of a certain product, may that be a car, a motorbike, or a television set. There are certain components which are made outside of the main facility, and therefore you have to outsource a certain number of components to suppliers who specialize in their production. And by the same token, I would say no nonprofit organization is fully equipped with all the support systems in order to be able to execute its programs effectively. So, what is the bottom line? The bottom line is that you have to incur a certain amount of cost on mustering different kinds of resources that you need to have in order to make your program effective. And you need to know what exactly is going to be the budget for that particular program. The other set of decisions that we need to consider is all about programmatic decisions. In other words, the decisions that we take in order to execute the program. And we execute the program in order to reach our target audience. And we also know very well that the target audience consists of donors, the volunteers, and our clients, in addition to so many other publics of which we are mindful, of course. And the point here again is that we need to have a certain level of financial resource in order to get to our target audience. It costs reaching them by executing the operation. And when we execute the operation, do not lose sight of the fact we are dealing with all the four variables of marketing mix. As long as you are mindful of this strategic consideration, you will not go wrong when you put together your programs. And therefore, the financial resource that has to be put together is a prerequisite in order to come up with an effective program. But the point is, where do we start? What is the starting point to start undertaking the budgeting exercise? Well, I would say that we need to be mindful of the fact that our operation is going to be very much in relation to the overall industry or the overall market, or in yet in other words, the overall marketing practices which are being undertaken toward that kind of a program that we have put together. If we are doing it for the first time and nobody has undertaken that before, well, it is going to be a very special kind of a situation. And we are going to be even more sensitive in that kind of a situation about the financial resource that we have to put together. So back to the point, what is going to be the point of departure before we can undertake that exercise? There are few important elements that we have to be mindful of. The one is the overall market. In other words, what is the overall market? How do we gauge it? How do we size it up? And this is a very important consideration because our operation is going to be a part of that. And in order to know that, we have so many different questions that come to our mind. In other words, what is going to be the size of the donors who form our market, or what is going to be the body of volunteers, or what is going to be the size of that population that is needy of a free lunch every day? You remember that example? And we also can look at the number of people who are wanting to quit smoking, and for that, they look toward an organization like ours, and therefore we have to have a very accurate and objective assessment of the market that we are going to run into. So, in other words, the overall market which we are going to serve, and when it comes to the segments that we shall be picking up, it's a question that we consider later. But in the first place, we must know what is the overall market. And yet another example is we may have to size up the market of those people who want to approach microfinance because they're going to want to be entrepreneurs, and they are looking for an NGO which specializes in dispersing the microfinance. So we may have to undertake that kind of exercise to be able to uh, size up the market that we're going to address. And there could be so many other examples, but the fact remains that the overall market and its size are the elements that we have to be very careful about, because until the time we know what the market is, we cannot be a part of that. And once we have done that, we have to be very clear about the size of our operation. Like I said, our operation is a part of that, and it is going to have a very close relationship with the overall market, and therefore its size has to be carved out, taking into consideration because there's so many different components that I already have talked about. I mean, all the strategic considerations in terms of our intent and resources and competencies and so on and so forth. And once we have done that, we then get down to the actual spend, which is a translation of all the resources that we need to move ahead with the program. Now, this asks for the further understanding of three important things. Number one is the total market demand, market forecasts, and market share. I'm sure we're all familiar with this terminology, but let me throw light on these one by one in the very context of a non-profit organization, because it has to first size up the total market and then look at the demand factor, meaning what is the total demand, and then out of that demand, what is it to see that is going to be forecasted by the organization in order to be able to achieve that. And whatever it achieves forms the basis for its market share. So let us first talk about total market demand. Total market demand, as experts say, is the aggregate of all exchanges, or is the total volume which is generated by all the players within the industry, meaning all the players within the market. But then you see there is a condition for that, and the condition is that it has to be generated by a group of consumers at particular given point in time, meaning there has to be a typical time frame within which that body of consumers consumes services. And also there has to be a special marketing environment under which the exchanges take place. And the exchanges that take place, that we have to remember, are all the programs and their deliveries in the marketplace, which in its aggregate form form the total market demand. So I would summarize this definition once again in very simple words, that it is the aggregate of all exchanges that take place within one particular market, meaning the total market, or in other words, all the segments put together. It is not to the exclusion of the one particular segment or the inclusion of the one particular segment. It is all the segments of the market, and they have to be considered in their entirety, in their totality, because that is the total the market demand. The question here arises is how do we estimate that demand? Because until the time, what is the total number of exchanges that have taken place in the past, or the exchanges that will take place in the future, which basically is our concern, because we want to come up with a forecast. And in the absence of a forecast, there is no way that we can undertake the budgeting exercise. Therefore, we have to be very sensitive to all the environmental factors that affect the future forecast. Before I can answer this question, let me tell you that estimating future market demand in a non-profit context is far more difficult than it is for a commercial entity. We know that commercial markets are very well established, and there's a lot of data and information relating so many different products. There is hardly anything which that does not have a lot of knowledge floating around it in the marketplace. You can go to chambers of commerce or associations offices and dig out a lot of data that you require. As a matter of fact, you can generate information on the basis of associated industries, or in other words, ancillary industries. For example, if you have access to an association which deals with car vendors, you can generate information on manufacturing of fenders, and by putting together total number of vendors, you can get to the final figure of the number of cars that are being made in a country. This is just one example of the manufacturing or the commercial side. And like I said earlier, because of the fact that the industries are well established, they have been operating for years and years, rather decades and decades, and therefore there is just no problem for a marketing person to be able to um, dig out the kind of information and data that they need to make their forecasts. In the first place, their operations are so well established that they have a lot of data relating their own products, and on the basis of their history, they can put together so many different kinds of statistical techniques in order to come up with a future trend, or they can have the very plain method whereby on the basis of their experience they can extrapolate numbers. Conversely, on the nonprofit side, we do not really have that kind of luxury because many of the programs and causes that are being addressed are not very old. And the fact that nonprofits they have to jump from one program to another, in many cases, they have to put together new and newer the variables that require new sets of information and the numbers generated thereof. So the marketing people on the nonprofit side could have to be more ingenious. They have to be more creative in order to come up with numbers that can lead them toward making their forecast. And for that, they have to get access the secondary databases, for example. They have to access information available in the governmental offices. They may look into different kinds of publications. They have to sit in the libraries and dig out relevant information. They also have to serve competitors to the websites. The fact is that nonprofit organizations also go to the extent of going to their direct competitors and seeking information from them. And in the process, they offer information on their own operations because they think by an exchange of information on both sides, they can at least move ahead with those numbers and with the findings which are reliable because that elevates their confidence. And they also go to the extent of forming associations if the one does not exist at the time they need the relevant data. So the biofarming associations, they are in a position to help each other because everybody becomes a member of the association, and any information which is needed um, down the line will be available with the association which represents the nonprofits in one particular industry. Again, the question is what is the size of the market? I keep saying that because we have to get to the final number. And let me add here that the total demand or the total market is not just the one specific number. Here you see it's a very interesting phenomenon because this specific number, whatever number you may arrive at, basically is a function of very specific conditions. Now, this is a statement that I've made, and I would like to explain this. What is meant by specific conditions, and how can you really manipulate or influence, I would say, those conditions? Well, there are two important factors that are behind influencing those conditions, which are to be considered by the nonprofit organizations in order to get to the point I'm trying to explain. And the very first factor is the governmental intervention. Governments in so many different countries play a very important role in making one particular cause um, known to the public. And they start advertising that particular cause and start talking about that cause through so many different channels. The radio being one, and the newspapers and print media being another. And now you see the social websites about a particular cause, which has to be um, propagated and information about it disseminated among the masses. This does a great trick for the nonprofit organizations that are in the process of trying to find out what exactly is the market size. Now, the reason I said it is not a fixed number, it rather is a function of some specific conditions. Here you see the conditions are being influenced by the intervention of the government. How? Well, the answer lies in a market size which is being expanded, and it is expansible, so to say. It is being expanded by the governmental intervention. And then, on top of that, the second important factor is the nonprofit organizations themselves. They have to propagate their the programs, they have to promote their products, and they need to talk with their target audiences. And in the process, they create a lot more awareness. As a matter of fact, whatever is the level of awareness created by the government, when nonprofits add to it, the cumulative effect of that it becomes even greater. And it is not just the one nonprofit organization that does undertake that exercise. It is all the nonprofit organizations within that particular industry. Now, don't forget that we are talking about the total market size, and the total market size is the aggregate of all the exchanges which are being generated by different programs run by different organizations. So I'm talking about things in their absolute totality. And with the influence of the campaigns, so to say, run by the nonprofit organizations themselves, coupled with the fact that the government also did a lot of work in creating awareness for one particular cause, the overall market size increases. And when that happens, you have access to some very interesting nuggets of information which are available here and there in the governmental offices and libraries and with your associations, if associations exist. And then you see that you have worked somewhat on that particular cause, so you know the fundamentals, and you have access also to other experts who can guide you in generating the right numbers. You can also have access to consultants, and this is something I'm going to talk about in a short while. But the point here is that you have to be very creative in the terms of generating the right information, because you need to size up the market. So these elements are the ones that really enabled you to come up with that magic number that I've been trying to explain how to generate. And with all those sources, it still remains challenging. It is more challenging than a nonprofit's counterpart on the commercial side. But the elements that I just explained are the ones that enable a nonprofit organization to move ahead with the uh, overall uh, estimate of the total demand in the marketplace. Once we know the total demand for the one particular the program, then we need to understand what a forecast is. Well, the forecast is, as we all know, a function of our ability to generate a certain level of demand for our own products, the meaning our own programs. We do that with the help of communications strategies and the different kinds of promotional programs. It could be events, and it could also be very comprehensive kinds of cause marketing relationships about which we are very well aware of. And we then move ahead with those numbers which we think we are confident of generating, or rather fulfilling, because we know the kind and the amount of resources that we need to put together in order to generate that level of demand, and that becomes our forecast. In other words, if the total market size is 100, and we think we can by employing different kinds of resources in terms of communications tools and some other the variables that we put together, we can generate like the 10 units, then that is our forecast. And that really is a function of our ability to influence the market in our favor. And we think that we can get 10% of the total market, and that becomes our forecast. And after the forecast, then we have to be clear about the share of the market. We all know from our understanding of the marketing theory that share of the market is that percentage of the total market that belongs to us. Like I said, you see, if the forecast is 10 units and the total market is 100, and if we really can achieve that number 10, then the market share is 10%. If we achieve like the 7 and not 10, then the market share is 7. But you see, there are a couple of things that have to be kept in mind in relation to market share, and those are the market share that has to be worked out not just in terms of the total market and the percentage that is yours. It also is the share of the segment in which you specialize, or the segment which you are trying to approach. And then you also have to be very watchful of your competitors as to the kind of market shares they have to themselves. And when you compare your market share against your competitors, you are in a good position to assess yourself. Now, the possibility is that you are increasing your share. But if your share is not increasing in the same proportion as that of your competitors, or at least to see those competitors who are in your league and your size and have the kind of profile and complexion like yours, and they are improving at rate faster than yours, then that should give you some cause for concern. And you should carry out self-examination as to what is happening with your product or your programs. Is it that your customers are not fully satisfied, or is it that the competitor has gotten into a cost marketing program with a commercial entity and therefore has given a big boost to their program, so on and so forth. So the market share is a very good indication of where you stand in relation to your competitors, because that really gives you the very realistic picture of the platform that is yours and where you really stand. We know that there are certain factors that have to be taken into consideration before we start making our forecasts, because now you see that we're getting into the forecasting and related matters, because the ultimate objective is to understand, as part of this component of learning, as to how to come up with uh, a budgeting exercise which is realistic, objective, which we can afford, and which is going to enable us to fulfill our mission. Therefore, we need to understand those factors that influence our forecasting. Like I said, we're getting into now forecasting exercise, and we have to be able to find certain ways and means, or other methods, whereby we can project our future demand, because everything is going to be translated from the demand into the operational expenses, as to what is going to be the level of human resource to be able to execute the program, what are the technology considerations that we have to take into account, because we may need to buy certain computers and the other devices, and so on and so forth. So therefore, what is it that really affect our forecasting that could be classified into three different important areas. The one is the non-controllable macro environmental factors. These are the factors like the state of economy. That is something which is not in the control of a non-profit organization. As a matter of fact, that is something which is beyond the control of any enterprise. and nobody can control the state of economy in a country. Then we have the technology factors which could be beyond our control. A new innovation may make it important for us to start buying the new technology, like I just said a moment ago, and having an impact on our forecasting. And then you see that we have things like regulatory framework, which may have some new revisions on part of the government, and we also may have a legal environment which has changed, with the passage of time. So, in other words, the forecast that we have prepared or are in the process of preparing could be affected by certain factors which are part of the outer environment, and that is something which is beyond our control. And then you see that we have competitive environment as another factor that also affects our the forecasting. And part of the competitive environment is the products or the programs offered by our competitors. They have a direct bidding on our programs, and don't forget we are part of a competitive market environment in which organizations compete for so many different things. And if donors happen to be a common market of two nonprofit organizations, then they're competing for donors. If the volunteers are the target audience, then they're competing for volunteers as well. And if they are trying to achieve the results which have to be similar, then you see that they need to be very vigilant in terms of execution of their programs. And there you see, we have to go back to the importance of all the 4 Ps, that we have to be vigilant at all times. Nothing goes wrong with each and every P that forms our overall mix of for the marketing practice at our organization. And therefore, see their programs or their products, their pricing, and their innovation. You see, if they come up with a new program with better features, rather more differentiated features, it is going to have a negative impact on our program, and vice versa, of course. So that is something I must qualify. Then you see that we have the environment that affects our forecasting, and that is internal company's environment. Here you see that we have our own pricing, we have our own programs, our own products, and our own promotions. I keep talking about the possibility of cost marketing relationships, and what if we are in the process of developing one? But where that is definitely going to have a very positive impact on our achievements, and therefore we need to have a compatible the forecasting mechanism whereby we come up with numbers that are achievable, and we are not to underestimate and at the same time not to overestimate. So these the factors are the ones that have to be considered before we come up with our forecast. And because of the existence of these factors, some of which are non-controllable and some of which are within our reach to control, we come up with certain approximations as the basis of our forecasts. This is something which is being done by every player in the nonprofit sector. And there are the different the methods which are in practice. And let me talk about those one by one, because they all happen to be bases of approximations. The one is, what they call target intention surveys. The experts say that the forecasting basically is something, what people say, what people do, and what people have done. Now, this really applies very well to this the particular kind of method, which is about revealing the intentions of your target market. What you do is you get in touch with a sample of the target market and ask them very direct questions about their intentions in the future. And on the basis of the findings of that the sample study, you come up with an overall number which you think should be your forecast. The ones you have determined with the help of the focus group or um, connecting with the sample of the target audience individually, you have generated certain numbers. And then it is a function of simple arithmetic to come up with the overall number which you think there should be your forecast. For example, if the university is to come up with a certain new program, an MPhil program or a doctorate program, they need to talk with students who have specializations related to those the particular programs, and they can ask them very direct questions as to whether or not they would be interested in joining those programs after they have completed those the specializations in marketing, for example, or in nonprofits, for example, and financial management, so on and so forth. So it is the intentions of the target market that become the basis of your forecasting. And don't forget, once you have generated these numbers, say for the first time, you have a history once you are past 1 year. Because then you see that you can always extrapolate, you draw some inferences on the basis of your experience and your achievements. Here you see the important thing is when you talk with the sample of the target audience, you've got to be very careful about choosing the sample because intentions could play a very important role. People have to show their true intentions, and then you see that they have to be the ones who really will carry out those intentions. If they do not carry out those intentions, the results that you inferred out of your connection with that sample the population is not going to be accurate. And that has to be the sample that really believes in what they say. And then, of course, there should not be a large amount of time elapsing between your study and the behavior that you want occurred. You are working for certain behaviors which you want to influence, and at the end of the day, when you would like to see that behavior presenting itself, the time between that point and when you interviewed the sample, the population should not be great, and not a great amount of time should be wasted between the 2 points. That exactly is what I'm trying to say. And then you see there is another the method which nonprofits exercise in many cases, and that is what they call expert forecasts. The reason they have to get in touch with experts because they cannot rely on a small sample population and their intentions when it comes to those programs that have long-term implications. As a matter of fact, you may already have been having this question in your mind, why I'm talking about these intentions and what to see if you're waiting for the behavior to occur, so many years down the line, if we are following one particular, social program. And it takes a lot of time for the desired behavior, to present itself. And therefore, we need to have expert forecasts with the help of those experts who can help us, because they are the people who may happen to be university professors who specialize in different social sciences, and therefore are in a position to guide us toward future developments, because they are the ones who are in a better position to study the present environment and can relate that with the future developments, and therefore should be the ones to be taken as people of expertise and a pool of expertise that just cannot be ignored. Then you see that you can get in touch with the associations that have been in the market for some time, and these associations may not be the ones that are directly connected with your cause, but they have to be the ones that are related in one way or the other, because on the basis of information and knowledge that you generate by your interaction with them, you can draw certain inferences. And then you see that you may also have to get in touch with other experts like doctors and engineers and other professionals who really can help you with scanning the environment. And the list goes on and on. You may have to talk with legal experts and you may also have to talk with um, the very specialized kind of anthropologists, so on and so forth. The point here is that you need to get in touch with those people who are better judges of the present environment and can give you a good projection of the future environment down the line, like you see how it will look like and the 1 year from now, 2 years, 3 years, so on and so forth. Um, Experts on the nonprofit side go on to say that in addition to uh, these experts that you get in touch with in relation to your forecast, you also should contact consultants because they are the ones who have an exposure to a host of different industries. And by the virtue of that kind of diversified experience, they are the people who really can put together things for you by charging you a fee. And now here you see, we may argue that consultants in most of the cases charge, and they charge a lot. But nonetheless, the effort is going to be worth its cost because if they are in a position to give you a very good basis for your forecast, that is something that you're looking for. And on the basis of that accurate forecast, or I would say a very realistic forecast, that you will be putting together your resources and you don't really want to go wrong there. What you see if you need the 10 more specialists in the area of health, and by having a wrong projection, you may hire like 20 or 25 people. So there's going to be a negative impact on the overall resources, and therefore you need the help of consultants as well. Um, There is another method, a very interesting one, and which could be a little more authentic than just talking in plain terms with experts. I mean, a body of different experts that I explained just a moment ago. And this method is known as Delphi. It's DELPHI. The Delphi method is an approach whereby you get in touch with the experts who are dispersed over a geographical area. For example, if we were to follow this Delphi approach in our country, we may as well get in touch with experts, all over the country in all the 4 provinces, so that we can have the input from experts and get to know what kind of considerations that they uh, took into account while they came up with their estimates or their inferences and guiding us as to what should be the forecast. So what happens is you get their inferences or their extrapolations or their estimates in terms of numbers because that's what you request them for. And with those the numbers and estimates, you also ask them to give you the considerations, like I said, and you put them together. You come up, you see with a pool of estimates, and you can come up, you see with kind of a common basis for inferring certain numbers, and you summarize all the considerations that they individually took into account. And once you have a consolidated form of those numbers and those considerations, you send it back to those experts for a review, and you tell them this is the basis of your consolidation because you got the inputs from different sources, and this is kind of a summary of that. And why don't you review it, revise it, and come up to with further considerations and further estimates? So the process goes on. They send you something in a renewed form. This, I would say, is a pretty much authentic method of trying to find out as to what should be the numbers of our forecasting exercise. And then you have another method, or rather, I would say a couple of methods that you base on statistical techniques. You can get into time series, but for that, you need to have a lot of data relating past years. And if you happen to be a huge organization that has been in existence for a number of years, you certainly have the resource and also the expertise to carry out that time series analysis because it is going to take into consideration things like what have been the trends and what have been the cycles that affected or influenced your actual working, and what could be the seasons that they may affect your programs. So after taking all these components into consideration, you carry out this kind of a statistical analysis with the help of time series, and that is something we're all familiar with from statistics. And the point here is that we have a lot many different kinds of methods to employ and or to choose from in order to come up with something which is objective and which is realistic. So once we have our forecasts, then we get down to making our budgets because it is a translation of the forecasts. And when you get into that kind of a translation, you have to be considerate of 4 or 5 different techniques that are taken into account by um, making the final decision as to what should be the spend, the actual spend, or the amount of money that you are going to spend on the program. There are certain things which are absolutely essential. You cannot avoid those. So those costs are to be taken into account. And there are certain things which you do by way of making judgments. When it comes to communications, for example, advertising, promotions, and so on and so forth. So therefore, you have the methods like what is it that you really can afford. The affordable method is based on what you really can afford. Now, this is not something which is going to help you always. You may rely on another method which says that you allocate a certain percentage of the total revenues which you think you're going to generate. And that is a program which may help you in a more realistic way. And then you see there's a method which says that you spend according to the fashion and the manner your competitors do. But then you see that there's a counter argument that your situation is different, your opportunities are different, and your priorities are different. And therefore, that is something which you must not follow in a blind manner, but you may take into consideration that particular method just in order to find out what is it that competitors are doing. And then you see you have objective and task method. You have your objectives, you translate those objectives into number of tasks and then see kind of costs which you will accrue executing those tasks. And then you see that there is a method which they call response optimization method. This is something which I would say that you gain with experience. Once you have been into your line of business or line of operations, so to say, you are in a much better position to work out the level of response which you want achieved after deploying a certain amount of resources. So you have to look for the most optimal response, and that doesn't really mean that you have to overspend. You also do not underspend because then you cannot optimize the response. You spend an optimal amount and get the optimal response. Thanks.